All right, it's actually really good to finally be working on airplanes again. It's been a couple years of virtually nothing, and there's a lot of reasons for that, but I don't think we need to get into that video. I'm just excited to say we're back at it. The planes are out of storage. We've got several of them in here. They're all different versions of our idea of what we wanted to do with a Cub Crafters product, the Carbon Cubs. It looks almost like it did when we got it out of the crate, but it's not. It's taken a lot of work and a lot of time to re-engineer and redo this whole frame to hold a big Lycoming Thunderbolt 540. So we're going to 330 horsepower, and this wasn't engineered for that. And we wanted to say, okay, how do we strengthen it up to hold the weight, different weight in different places, and cut weight where we can, and make it still fly like a lightweight Cub. That's a pretty fine needle to thread. Like, that's a small target to say, big engine, big horsepower, fly like lightweight, small horsepower. So one of the first things that we had to do is we had to pull the engine back. And so the engine's been on and off here, I don't know how many times, as we reworked the front, reworked the cowling. We wanted to have it look like a Carbon Cub. We love the look, we love the cowling. But if you're gonna have that big engine, one, you can't just put a big engine on the front. That's been done. I'm sure many of you have seen Cubs with like a 540 on the front. There's been a few, but generally they just pull the engine mount back to the firewall as tight as they can, and then they add a bunch of weight to the plane to get the center of gravity right. The challenge is you added a heavy engine, and you added a bunch of weight to the back to balance the airplane, and now you have an airplane that doesn't fly like a lightweight airplane, and you've added unnecessary, unuseful weight all the way back in the tail. So we had to pull the engine all the way back. We moved the entire firewall. In fact, instead of the engine mount bolting through the firewall to the bolt points on the other side, we actually integrated the engine mount into the frame to save the weight of the 4 bolts that go through your firewall. I hope that makes sense. It's an awful lot of work to save 4 bolts, but that's 8 washers and 4 more nuts that never have to be there, and the pass-through points, which adds more chromoly or steel into the structure. So the engine pulled back so far that it steps, and you can't see it. We'll hopefully do some more videos, show you the carbon fiber parts we made in here, but the feet sit underneath, and the engine parts actually come through here, so there's a shelf in here to house accessories. So that's how far we pulled it back. In fact, when the windshield's on here and the cowling's on, the prop is 10 inches closer to the windshield than a stock Carbon Cub. So if you can imagine, instead of a 4-cylinder, saying from accessory case to the prop flange is like this, a 6-cylinder is like that, and yet on this plane, all of that is pulled back so far, the prop is closer to the windshield. So when it's all put together, it looks like a Carbon Cub, but if you looked really, really close, a lot of people that don't understand weight and balance, they'd see what looks like a smaller cowling, which would mean smaller engine, and they might think, oh, what little 2-stroke engine did you put in there? And the reality is the cowling's small because we pulled the engine so far back so we wouldn't have to add weight into the tail. The other reason for that is if you want it to feel like it's light, you have to think about where the weight is. So if I've got a heavy engine in the front and a bunch of weight in the back to counteract it, now the farther the weight is from the center pivot point of the airplane, which in a Cub is basically centered right around the pilot. The yaw, the pitch, the roll is all centered right here. So you've got to get any weight to shift. You got to get that mass into motion, and then you have to stop it again. Just imagine just taking off and the tail starts getting sideways on you. You've got to step on a rudder and have strictly the movement of the air, put enough pressure on that rudder to get that mass in motion to stop and swing back to where you need it to go without overshooting. The analogy I like to give is if you've ever held a really heavy kettlebell at a gym, and if you were to pick up 2 of them and spread them out like the front of the airplane and the back of the airplane, and you put them out as far as you can with really heavy weights, and you try to get that weight swinging and stopping, it's incredibly difficult because the moment's so far out, that weight's so far that once it's moving, it has all the leverage to keep you or the airplane twisting. And it takes that much force to stop it. If you take those same 2 kettlebells and pull them tight to your chest, it's actually very easy because you don't have them out here with the leverage fighting you. So the engine's pulled all the way back. We added no weight to the tail so that when we step on the rudder, we're not got a big old motor out there in the front that we have to get going and then more importantly stop it from continuing, especially on takeoff and landing. So I'm really happy with how it turned out as it currently sits, with the use of SolidWorks and some math and some clever engineering and we working the front of this. We added material where it needed to be. We triangulated some more points, but we did get the weight far enough back that we're not adding weight to the tail. It should feel the same. And that, of course, translates into pitch, too. If you pull back and you got a lot of weight up front, a lot of weight out back that you have to get going and then get stopped, it starts to feel like a heavy airplane. We want it to feel like, well, an ultralight, like a Carbon Cub feels. Lots of horsepower, ultralight, ultra responsive. That's the goal. So that's what we did with the engine. That took a lot of work, and we'll show you how that works. One of these days, we'll get one of these other Cubs. It has a 4-cylinder engine. We'll put them side by side, and you can see here's the 6-cylinder, looks like a small nose, and the 4-cylinder looks like a big nose, but that was done by design to make it fly like a lightweight airplane. Okay, the other thing we did is we moved the pilot seat back. It's moved back about 10 inches, and the co-pilot seat, or the back seat, is about the same spot. So it's about 4 inches. I don't remember exactly. It's been 2 years ago that we redid all that. But when both seats are in, it's still very comfortable, and you have a lot of room. But there were things I thought, we want to keep it light. We added a big engine, so let's not just leave everything in the plane we don't need. I don't do any flight instruction. I actually don't like passengers with me. When I'm flying a Cub, I just want it to be as light and nimble as possible. So generally I don't take people in the back, and I never take people in the back that I'm trying to teach to fly. This airplane with this big engine, it probably is only going to be flown by experienced tailwheel pilots that can just jump in a one-off tailwheel airplane and fly without concern. So the back seat has no pedals because that adds weight and connecting arms, and all that's been removed. There's also not a stick in the back because that let me shorten up this tube and the connecting points and cables and just eliminate quite a bit. So even though there's a little less room between the pilot and the rear seat, because there's not a stick there, it feels much larger. And because your feet aren't coming up against cables and things on your foot or pedals in front of you, it again feels roomier. You feel free in the back to move about, not worry about anything. Also, without those controls in the back, I don't have to add a throttle back here or a mixture. So it really does just the part count coming down. Less parts, less things to go wrong. And of course, for me, one of the most important things, lighter weight, better handling. We did add this tank back here. This is a header tank because when you're really playing aggressively in the backcountry, you change plans all the time. The weather changes quick. You find a canyon you want to explore, and knowing exactly how much fuel you have as you're getting lower is important. Cubs traditionally don't give you that luxury. You're looking at a little sight glass up here at the wing root, and you're looking at the flow computer, and you're hoping it's accurate, and then when you filled it up on the ramp that it wasn't leaning this way or that way and left you short a gallon or two. And when it starts getting low, you can actually get to where you don't see fuel in the sight glass, but you might still have 5 gallons per wing. But you don't know if you have 10 gallons that are invisible or your engine's going to quit. So generally, what we all do, and what I think everybody does, is we fly with more fuel than we need because we need that assurance that we know how much fuel there is. So what we've done is we're adding these tanks in the back, and it'll fill from the top, and these will go up to each wing. There'll be a fuel probe, a capacitance probe right here in the center. The reason we used a cylinder tank with a tapered end is, one, when that probe goes right down the center, it doesn't matter if it's leaning like this or like this or like that or any variation, that fluid is still centered on the capacitance probe. So if I park on a hillside and this says, this is a 7.5 gallon tank, if it says I have 6 gallons, I have 6 gallons. I can lean it the other way, it's going to say 6. I can point it down, point it up, it's going to say 6. So when I get to the last 45 minutes of fuel, I know exactly 45 minutes of fuel. And it's going to go all the way down and bleed every last drop. This is a safety thing. What it really allows me to do is carry 7 gallons less fuel than I normally would, because the wings are going to start to run dry. This will start to come down and I'll be like, oh, my fuel computer says I have 12 gallons left. This started to drop down to 6. Oh, and now it's coming back up to 7 again because I was in a turn or a slip and a little more fuel got out of the 2 tanks in each wing. There's 4 tanks. And so as this starts coming down, flying around empties even more fuel out of the wings, and you get down to the point where every last drop is usable. This looks like a lot of weight. It's really not, especially if you consider that with confidence on how much fuel you for sure have at the end, you're not carrying an extra 10, 15 gallons of fuel at, 6, 7 pounds a gallon. I'm thinking jet and avgas, but you're not carrying all that extra fuel. I'm only carrying an extra 5 pounds of aluminum. That's not even 1 gallon of gas, so that I can carry 7 gallons less fuel on every flight that I'm flying, because I probably won't very often ever fill the tanks full. I take what I need, but now I take what I need with confidence. So the next thing you might notice if you've built the Cub is that these floor plans back here and even the holder for the tank, it's all carbon fiber. That was a big debate. I'm glad I did it. It was an awful lot of work to replace all these parts. There's the 2 here, there's the sides and the back. There's a total of 9 parts that come already done, ready as a kit to just put in and you're done. And we rebuilt all of them out of carbon fiber, and we only saved 1 pound per part. And it's like, that's too much work for a pound, but there's 9 of them. It's 9 pounds to just have that. So it took a lot of time, but that's 9 pounds I never have to carry ever again. And so it's worth it. So that was some weight saving things. We even went as far as back here on all the stringers that you see on the plane. They make them nice and wide so they're easy to glue on, but the glue's really just close and tapered in. So once all the stringers were on, we ground off the excess. That's just grams, but it's unnecessary and it's weight, so it's gone. The other thing with the Cub is there's really lightweight 31-inch tires for these Cubs. My original carbon Cub, I ran around on 29s, were really light. I need a bigger tire. The 29's real light, but I like the 31 better. But as soon as you go to a 35-inch tire, you got much bigger rims. You've got to have bigger brakes, bigger calipers, and so the weight just stacks, 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 stacks. To go from a 31-inch tire to a 35-inch tire with all the changes that are necessary adds a shockingly high amount of weight. So I flew around on 29s and with a lot of great friends and a lot of really fun places. And whenever somebody said, hey, Mark, this is 35-inch tire only country, you can't bring that thing in here. And I'm like, well, yeah, you're on a 35-inch tire in a plane that's 350 pounds heavier than mine. Let's bounce around on the little 29s. And because it's so light and nimble, I just never had an issue. I am going to go up to a 31. The 35s look better. I love that. I will have tire size envy. But for me, I'd rather have a lighter plane than a bigger tire, because the lighter plane is recognized in every phase of flight. The bigger tire only matters on the really, really rough stuff that maybe I won't even go into if it's that rough. But for me, every phase of flight, everything we do, weight matters. The difference between a 31 and a 35, for me, it just it just didn't pan out. There's no right or wrong decision here. I'm not trying to convince anybody. That's just where I landed for me. I'd rather have a lighter plane, and I can scare the crap out of myself on 31s, and I don't need a 35 to find bigger boulders to try to tip my airplane over on. I'm good. I'll be old man careful on my 31. So that saved a bunch of weight, but there's a disadvantage. A smaller tire means your plane is got a lower angle of attack for takeoff. So if you want to increase that angle of attack to get a shorter takeoff, you either have bigger tires or taller landing gear. Bigger tires, more weight. Taller landing gear, also more weight. If you want to just bring that angle up a degree or two, it takes inches of steel tubing all the way through. So, and the longer your landing gear, the more leverage point it has to tear things apart at the attach point. So shorter gear is actually stronger at the frame's weak points. So all that considered, we decided to increase the angle of attack by lifting the forward part of the wing. So we did re-engineer the attach points on the wing. We lengthened our struts here. We actually reinforced and used stronger, thicker tubing because of the engine out there. But in the end, we increased the angle of attack with the wing, so we didn't have to add a bunch of weight with gear and tires. So we can still get that angle of attack for a really short takeoff. And yes, those of you that are thinking it already, yes, that will mean when flying, it's slightly more nose down because the wing's going to fly at an angle of attack, a certain angle of attack based on the aircraft's weight to maintain an altitude, of course. I actually am excited about that because when I'm cruising in flight, I like more view over my cow. And so to have that nose down an extra degree and a half for flight is not a problem. And since the stabilizer on this is controlled with the trim, the entire thing, it's not just a trim tab on the rudder, but the whole stabilizer moves up and down. I'm not inducing any drag with the tail by changing the angle of attack on the wing. It just means the tail is trimmed until they're both flying beautifully at the right angle of attack for level flight. So that was done to save weight and shorten takeoff performance, because we can't, stuff the tail into the ground. I'll also be using a very small tail wheel on the back that drops the tail a little bit, and I'll let it bounce over rocks. I don't think I'm going to go with a big tire in the tail, because even when I've noticed when I land in really soft sand, the nice skinny tire, just a little forward stick pressure brings it up out of the sand. It's not dragging, it's not an issue, and I don't want the weight. And I do like a steeper takeoff angle when I'm at a 3-point attitude. Now, some changes had to be made that did add a little bit of weight, but it was required. We talked a little bit about the engine being here and having to add weight in the back to balance it. We didn't have to do that by pulling the engine back far enough, so we kept the weight real tight and real nimble and easy to manage, but we have horsepower, a lot of Lycoming ponies on the front. So the rudder did have to get bigger. So we ran the math, and I wish I could tell you how many inches bigger. It seems like it's about 4.5, 5 inches taller and 2 or 3 inches longer. I don't remember. That's been over 2 years ago that we re-engineered the tail. But the rudder is larger to handle the P factor of all that engine. In normal flight, it doesn't really make a difference. We're not designing the plane to fly any faster than Cubcrafter's normal redlined airspeed, and with the longer wings, we're actually pulling that red line back a little bit more because we only have so much strength in drag links or drag wires and drag tubes. So everything we're doing has a mathematical reason behind it, and what I want an airplane to fly like as the driving factor. I want it to be light and big horsepower and feel like an ultralight. So to do that, I can't have a tiny rudder with a big engine, because you go like Mike's airplane Turbulence, the race plane, the first version of it. As you start pushing that power up, if you went full power and your right foot was all the way on the floor, it was still taking off left of the runway. So if you have a big engine, you need a bigger rudder so you can actually use the engine on takeoff. And in bush planes, if you can't go full throttle on takeoff, what was the point, right, of the big engine? So that was changed. I'm trying to think what else I could share, or if that's it for now. There's a lot others, but let's wrap it up and go take a look at the wings, and we'll tell you what we've done there. And I'm sure there's a lot more we can do in other videos. But anyway, off to the other hangar. Let's go play. All right, so here's where we've got the wings stored for now. We've got a little bit more work still to do before we cover them, but all the difficult stuff is done. Re-engineering them to make them longer and still have the gross weight we want was the biggest thing. And then using all the wonderful Cub Crafters parts that are so light, and then changing things that needed to be changed. The biggest thing is that we changed, well, we'll start with the little things. Down at the end, the cap over the 2 gas tanks was normally aluminum. That is a structural part. It's like a box. Think of a big flat triangulated area at the wing root where there's a lot of force trying to pull this wing back, a lot of drag. And so we replaced that from aluminum to carbon fiber, but it's not as much weight savings as we had hoped because you got to make the carbon fiber thick enough to have the strength that the aluminum had, and but it did save weight. So I don't know that it was worth all the effort to redo that out of carbon fiber instead of just using the aluminum that was there, but we've got the strength that it needs to have, and we saved weight. So every gram counts. The big things with the wing was the added length. Like I talked about before, the goal for me was I loved my EX1 Carbon Cub. It was close to 900 pounds, and that light feel was everything. For me, that's flying. Just light stick pressures. When you step on the rudder, the plane moves, it yaws, you pull back, push forward, everything reacts quick because it doesn't weigh anything. And the heavier and heavier the backcountry airplane, the less, for me, fun it is. It's just not as agile and nimble, especially when you get into really tight spots. So I wanted to keep that lightweight feel, but we've got that big engine. The only way to do that really is to keep the weight centered, like we talked about earlier, and to make sure that the wing loading is right. So if we're going to have an airplane that arguably is going to be about the same weight as an EX3, but I want it to fly like the lighter weight EX1s, I've got to have more wing. So we did that. We're going to be light, but we're still heavier than my old EX1. So we added 16 inches to each wing, and we did that out here at the end. Part of the change is at the flap. The ailerons moving out 16 inches, they didn't need to get any bigger. They've got more leverage out at the end. There's plenty of flying surface, and the ailerons on the Cub Crafters are huge, which is why they react so well. Even at slow speeds, you have a lot of roll authority, whereas a lot of backcountry airplanes, if you get really slow, the ailerons are so small that you can give it full aileron, and it just takes a while for the wing to move because you're flying so slow you don't have enough air flowing over it to get the weight to shift. So Cub Crafters hasn't ever had that issue. They got these massive ailerons, but I did always want a little bit more flat and for that extra slower flight. So we pushed the wings out. Most of that work was done here, but we left the aileron just pushing out and extended the flap 16 inches. So the flap is 16 and I think an 1/8 inch larger. And then everything else shifts out. So we had to go to longer spars here and here. And we're using the same attach points originally. So we did spar caps and this spar here, that's to stiffen it up, give it some more strength. And this spar here and this spar actually we were able to source. We didn't have to do our own mold like Mike did with Scrappy and extrude his own spars. We were able to buy these in a full length at 16 inches longer than Cub Crafters wing. So we know they're tried, they're true, they're proven. The webbing's a little bit thicker. We didn't put any lightning holes in it because that spar at its full length is exactly what I need. And with 16 inches per side, 32¼ inches more wing drops that wing loading and lets it get off the ground really slow and fly really slow. And with the ailerons moved all the way out that much farther, we still have the roll authority that we want. So that's the gist of the wing. Consider it really a Cub Crafter wing with longer spars, added rib. We also had to add a compression tube here, like here, because your drag wires, you've got to be able to tighten those up so the wing doesn't pull back and fold up in flight. So you've got these drag wires in here, but the only way to tighten those drag wires is if you've got these torque tubes or compression tubes through the center. So we did have to add one out here for that added length. That added a little bit of weight, but overall, considering how much lower our wing loading is for the little weight we added into the wing, it's gonna feel like a 900-pound Cub, but with 330 horsepower of Lycoming Thunderbolt, awesome. So I'm really excited. You never know with these airplanes, you know, computer and math and science and engineering is really, really good these days. And using SolidWorks is like a cheat code. And so you get a good idea of how things are going to be. And for the most part, it works out the way the math said it should. And every now and then, the real world's different. So I'm anxious to be finally back working on the project, to give everybody an update, to have it out of storage. In the end, I just can't wait to fly it. I should have a plane that feels like a 900-pound or 940-pound Carbon Cub, but has 330 horsepower and comes in with a total weight of under 1,300 pounds. That's the goal. I hope to be more like 1,250, but we'll see. I think I'm deciding I'm going to put an autopilot in it and make it IFR capable. So everything costs weight, but coming home from Alaska when the weather's bad, that has value too. So that's the update. I'm excited. I can't wait to put the wings on the airplane, get it all rigged up, and then take them off one last time and skin them, and then I'll feel like it's turning into an airplane. So far, it's been a whole lot of work and a couple years of doing nothing while I dealt with my health and changes, big changes in our life. And but I'm back. So let's go play. Or Mike would say, back to work. Let's go play.